Okay, so welcome back. We have the opportunity of spending a little bit of time doing this series called "The Pillars of the Jewish Community," where we're learning a little bit about the inside track, some of the parts of the institutions of our community which perhaps we are used to, we think we know about, and perhaps we don't know necessarily so much about. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors this morning who are sponsoring our learning this morning. Sandy and Ed Clark for the Refuah Shlema of Rivka Devorah Bas Alta Chaya Zissel, and the Refuah Shlema of Matla Raza Bas Sarah Fega and Sarah Bula Bas Leah. Be'ezras Hashem, we should see complete refuah Bakara.
Amen.
We also thank Barbara and Jack Siegel, who are sponsoring in honor of the Yortzeit of Jack's father, Mr. Sigmund Siegel, Alexander Zisha ben Yechiel Halevi. The Shmosai Edlin, the Yortzeit just
tonight.
Tonight, and the Shama should have an aliyah. Let's get going. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking a little bit about the Jewish day school. We all know about Jewish day schools because we send our kids there, we send our grandkids there. This is something which we think we know a lot about, but I guarantee that we don't know so much about when we do a deep dive. We are very excited to welcome to our shir, our learning today, Rabbi Heshy Glass, who's no stranger, Baruch Hashem, a neighbor and friend to many, and who has helped our children move from their infancy to their independence throughout many of the school systems. Rabbi Glass is the founding national chairman of the Consortium of Jewish Day Schools, and also an educator, spent time as the principal of HELB and of EULA, among many of his educational forays and expertise in the field. He has trained and taught over 60 day school principals, and in partnership with WASC and MSA and ISACS, sat and chaired the evaluation committee, and both for public and private schools. He has a master's and graduate level education in essential courses and developed programs to allow Jewish educators to receive state credentialed degrees. He spent many years in Israel under the direction of Moshe Chait, Zechroni Vracha, at the Yeshiva Chovetz Chaim in Queens. So Rabbi Glass also has a master's in school psychology from City College and a doctorate in education from Florida International University in '94. Rabbi Glass's goal as the founding national chairman of the consortium is to raise the quality of principal training, development, and mentoring to cultivate a strong leadership skills among current and future principals. So basically, Rabbi Glass is dealing with all the principals, all the leaders of the current generation of education are spending time with Rabbi Glass. And Rabbi Glass very humbly davens in our shul, and we don't even realize what's going on a daily basis. If anybody wants to take a moment to go and visit the consortium, it's right over here, just a few blocks away on Pearsall. And you can see a major operation of curriculum development and of trainings which go on. It's really as something to be proud of in our community. Rabbi Glass, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Trump. And we're fortunate that we live in a community that has Rabbi Trump and the Young Israel, that he finds all these wonderful programs. So.
It's the best, Baruch Hashem. I think it's important to be aware of what's going on in our backyard. So I'm curious just for a little moment. So you spend a lot of time in education, teaching as a principal on the East Coast, the West Coast. Now you came back. How did this circuitous journey lead to your current state of affairs of this broader global view of leadership?
So I started out many years ago as a school psychologist. I had a degree from City College uptown, and got married. This is in the 70s, if anybody's that old. And my wife had the idea, let's go to Israel for a year or two, and let's learn. So I joined Rabbi Chait's kollel in Eretz Yisrael. And after the second year, we had a baby. It's her birthday today, so she's 47 years old. You can figure out the math over there. And Rabbi Chait calls me into the office, and he says, I think you should be a principal. So I looked at him and I said, I have a degree in school psychology, I'm going to work for New York City Board of Ed, and I'm done. And live in Flatbush someplace, like on East 13th Street. She says, no, you have to know three things to be a principal. First thing you have to know is you should smile, so people will want to come and talk to you. Makes sense. The rabbi likes this. Second thing you should know as a principal is always be aware that you're spending other people's money. this probably saved me in 100 different board meetings. It's not my money, it's the school's money. I guess sometimes you're spending a lot of it. And the third thing, because I teach this now to a lot of younger principals, you're never going to please everybody, so just try to do what's right. And those are three things that got me involved. My first job as a principal, I was the founding principal of what today is Yeshiva of North Jersey in Bergen County. Did that for the morning. I was the morning principal in those days. And the afternoon, this was 1979, there was a fellow named Rabbi Menachem Genak, who was just hired to run kashrus. Rabbi Genak that year had the opportunity in the afternoon to learn with the Rav Zatzal. So I was drafted by a fellow in Teaneck, Dr. Stephen Cates, who was very active in the OU. He said, in the afternoon you have nothing to do, why don't you go run kashrus? And this way Rabbi Genak can learn with the Rav. So I did that for a year, and then I was offered a position to start a school in Miami. What today is Torah Semis, Torah Academy in Miami.
A lot of grandchildren there.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. But I started, this was 1980, there was no building, we had a little bus. I lived in North Miami Beach, and the school was in 79th Street in Carlisle. I drove the bus to get the kids to school in the morning. And the school grew. I left in 1985. There were a few hundred kids already. Miami was growing. People were coming down. And that's when I got involved in Florida International University. You know, things happen. It's a little funny. The Federation in Miami had this brainstorm. They were going to fund all the Jewish schools in Miami. There was no Boca, there was no Hollywood then. It was just Miami. And they were looking for a method. How do you fund Jewish day schools? So I was sitting on a committee, and the idea then was hire credentialed teachers. And if you hire teachers with credentials, we'll give you a subsidy of 30% of their salary. So there was an incentive to upgrade the standards at the school. We did this for a year. We had the Hebrew Academy, which Rabbi Gross, Olav Shalom, was the principal. I was running Torah Semis. There was one other school total, something called Sheikh Hillel in North Miami Beach, if you're familiar with the communities. Chabad wasn't really getting anywhere. And we did this for a year, and then someone at the Federation says, well, what about the credential of the principal? I wasn't thinking along those lines. Teachers, we understand, what about the principal? So I went to the local university in North Miami Beach, was Florida International, made an appointment, spoke to a fellow named Dr. Fain, who was the dean, and I went for a doctorate in education. One of my fellows who was also in the program, a fellow named Yossi Haber, Olav Shalom. If you knew Miami, Yossi Haber was the principal of the Hebrew Academy High School. And we're sitting there in the summer of 1985, and Yossi looks at me and he says, I was offered a job in Pittsburgh. He says, my wife, his father-in-law was the mayor in town. Miami was much smaller then, everybody knew each other. He says, I really don't want to go to Pittsburgh. So I said, Pittsburgh, maybe. He gave me 2 tickets. There was no TSA in those days. I went to Pittsburgh and I became a principal. That summer, unfortunately, you see the Hashkacha Pratis, he was in a very bad car accident in Israel. He was nifta. And I went to Pittsburgh. He's very famous. If you go down to Florida, you mention Yossi Haber, everybody. Spent 3 years in Pittsburgh, and there was a fellow who came from Pittsburgh, the Butler family. Everybody know the Butler family? Okay. Hansi and Donald Butler. So there was a butler in Pittsburgh, there's a butler in Los Angeles, who was a writer. And he told someone that a school in Beverly Hills was looking for an educational director. So I wound up in Beverly Hills with Rabbi Gottesman, Olav Shalom, and spent a few years. He was a parent at my school back in Beverly Hills days. He reminds me all the time. Okay. And spent a few years there. And those of you from this neighborhood could appreciate it. Rabbi Armin Friedman from Hal was retiring. So there's a fellow who lives not so far from here. He made Aliyah recently. His name is Jerry Williams. You guys all know Jerry Williams? Yeah. Jerry Williams' father was very close with the Gottesman family from Oceanside. And he was friendly with Moshe Gottesman. And he asked Moshe Gottesman, do you know anybody that could help us run Hal after Rabbi Friedman retires? He says, I don't know. I'll speak to my brother. Maybe there's someone on the West Coast. A few days later, Jerry Williams shows up in Hillel in Beverly Hills, and he wants to talk to me. And then I was on a plane to come to Long Beach, New York, to run Hal. This was 1992. We lived around the corner. I became a member here in the shul in 1992. This didn't exist. There was the corner, and there was upstairs. The Hashkama menu was upstairs. It was totally different. I did that for about 15 years, ran Hal. Then when I tell principals, you know the famous song from Willie Nelson, you have to know when to hold them. This is a mature group. You have to know when to fold them. So it was like time to leave, because there's a whole new crop of parents and lay leaders and children that weren't there when you started. Even though we had wonderful friends in this neighborhood, people in LA called, said, can they come back and run Beulah High School? Rabbi Tendler was leaving. I went back there for another 6 years to Beulah. And then what do you do when you're an old principal? Like, what do you do? What do you do afterwards?
Become a consultant.
Yeah, no, so the choice was to go to Eretz Yisrael, take out the cup of coffee, put on a pair of sunglasses, sit on a porch, and learn some Gemara, which you didn't have time to do for 35 years. And someone tapped me on the shoulder, an anonymous person, and said, the day schools need some help in North America. Can you help fix the day schools? Why me? Well, you lived in Florida, you lived in Pittsburgh, you lived in LA, you lived in New York, maybe you could help us. So it was like a challenge. What does it mean to help the day schools? And the idea was, can we raise the bar in chinuch, particularly day schools out of town? So it started as a very small operation. This is about 12, 13 years ago. Today we service, Baruch Hashem, 400 day schools. And it's really very exciting. I encourage everybody to get involved. Everyone's welcome to visit the office. It's at 395 Pearsall. We took over most of that building now. And you know, Rabbi Trump is my Rav. And I once remarked to Rabbi Trump, about 5 years ago, I met at Kennedy Airport, I met Rabbi Warren Goldstein from South Africa. I'm sure you know. And Rabbi Goldstein and I talking about having a cup of coffee, and he says, what do you do? What do you do? And anyway, today we service all the Jewish day schools in South Africa. We have a full-time person living there, Rechama Welcher, who works in the rabbi's office. We ship 3 big pallets of materials every year to South Africa. And because they have one Rav for the whole community, everybody does the same thing. So one of the areas that I thought was very important for the Jewish day schools was not to allow every school to decide what's important, because it gets a little complicated. You look back at your history and you say, what gave me the right to decide in Hal, let's say? A lot of these people were Hal parents, have to be careful. I don't get a paycheck from them anymore, so I really. What gave me the right to decide in 3rd grade, we're going to learn Chayesara and not Toldos? We're going to concentrate on Rashi's and we're not going to do Ivrit. I don't know. So if you allow every principal to decide what's important, you have to roll it back a drop. Who gave that principal the right to make that decision? And that's where we got very involved. So I decided at the time to go on 2 tracks. One track was principal training, and to get consensus, what should a principal know before running a school? And the second track was to give them materials so that they could do something with it. They can actually have programs. So I was talking to my good friend here, Alan. He has a cousin who runs a day school in Queens. And I spent most of my summer spending time one-on-one with many, many day school principals from across the country. Next week I'll be in Indianapolis at Hastings Hebrew Academy. Have a meeting later today with people from Cincinnati. Last week we had a Zoom meeting with some folks from St. Louis. And for me it's exciting. We're trying to work with the schools. What should the standard be at the school? And I thought I would throw in one more quick item. We all live in the 5 towns. It's a wonderful place. The schools here are great. But it's a little bit of a bubble. It's not really what's going on in North America. I need someone to become a principal in Calgary. I need someone to become a principal in Portland. Anybody interested? So the trick is, I think, the last question that I would ask you, what's the greatest hurdle for success? Really, I think we're not developing a pipeline for people to go into Jewish education. And if we don't develop a pipeline of some sort, we're not going to have teachers, and we surely won't have principals that will go out of town and try and help. But that's like a quick overview. This is what I do, and everyone's welcome to come visit the office. We send out every year, believe Guzma, a little over 100,000 books, which are printed here, and they go all over the place.
There's so much to jump to pick on. I'd like to pick up on a few pieces over here. So there's so many questions. Before even getting into the consortium for just a second, is how did you educate your own children when every few years you were transforming another community? I mean, your kids are
so I would counsel everyone, marry the right woman. I think I did, right? Yes.
That's good advice in general.
Good advice in general, but for this in particular. So, you know what's fascinating? The rabbi's right, it's complicated. So Hayom, you know, where should educators come from? And I'll show you how I'm going to answer the question. So I go to a place called Lakewood. You know, once a fellow or a woman has their kids in the cheder in Lakewood, they're not leaving. Same thing in this neighborhood. Even a YU graduate, once their kids are, let's say, halfway through Halb or Shalamis or wherever, they're not moving to Edmonton. So that's strike 2. Who else is there out there? You have Chafetz Chaim. They're sending people out, but they only go to Chafetz Chaim type schools. I was talking to somebody this morning. He has a kid in Tucson. They just started a branch in Tucson. Yeah, who's right?
Rabbi Becker's place.
Rabbi Becker, so they just started a day school over there. When we moved out of town, so the only other group that's going to go out of town is Chabad. So we work very closely. We have 50 Chabad schools in our network. All right. Baruch Hashem, my wife and I have 6 children that made Aliyah. Rabbi Trump knows one of them from Karen Biavna days. So besides all the other problems, the healthy problem is that there's a brain drain. A lot of the best and brightest from our schools made Aliyah. We were successful. So they're not going out of town anymore. But when we moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1988, or 1985, my daughter, whose birthday is today, she was in 4th grade, and she was the only girl in 4th grade that kept Shabbos. Only one. It got worse when we moved to California, but in Pittsburgh, she was the only girl. Today, if you know my daughter, she's the main mechanechet at Machon Ora in Passaic. She lives in Ermont. She married a Hasidic fellow, and she's leading a Hasidic lifestyle. Her son had just had a second baby Friday. We have a bris this Friday in Lloyd's in Yerushalayim for a great grandson. So sometimes when your children are out of town, you rise to the occasion. It doesn't have to be negative, but you need a home that's going to foster it and say, let's have the girls come to us on Shabbos, but you can't go over there. And my wife will tell me now today that it wasn't always so simple moving from place to place. Besides the packing and everything else, there is, one of our kids probably suffered as a result. Not physically, but just, if somebody was really entrenched here in hockey, and then you pull them out of it, and you go to some place like, LA does not play hockey. They play basketball. So you have to understand that before you're moving a teenager, like, what's their interest. And you just have to be careful. If we can help with this, if you want to take careers in...
It's incredible. It's just the amount of personal sacrifice to...
Yeah. So I don't interview a family, a husband or a wife, to move out of town unless they're both in the office. Because you really have to get a handle on what's it going to be like. What's the, how old are the kids, and where does everybody come from? So someone who grew up out of town, it's a little bit easier to send them back. But if someone grows up in this neighborhood, it's not so simple. Or someone growing up today in Lakewood, it's not so simple to move to Calgary. The local Rav in Calgary today grew up in Calgary. He happened to go to Tells, so his wife is running the school. But we need more people.
There's so much to discuss and just such a wealth of information. I wanted to take a step backwards to understanding just the development of the school system. You know, if you look in the Torah never talks about a school system. Torah's description of education is Yishinantu levonecha v'limadtem, right? The Torah talks about parents. It doesn't talk about schools. So how did this transform into schools? How did we get to where we are today?
Right, so I saw the question the rabbi asked after Minyan this morning. I went on my phone, and you could ask Google almost anything. So Google came back. I can't make this up. Google came back with the Gemara in Baba Basra. Dam Rabbi Yehuda Marav Bar Zocher Oso Hishla Tov Yeshua Ben Gam Lashmo. This is a Google made this morning. So he used the pasuk V'limadatem Osam and V'limadatem Atem. Every father has the responsibility to train their own child. It didn't work after a while. So he made a school system, this fellow Yeshua Ben Gamla. And I was thinking to myself, you know, the current American school system, at least the public school system, was built on something called the factory model. The trick was how many kids can you put in a classroom and facilitate as they go through grade 1 through grade 12, and they learning how to get along with 20 other or 25 other people, and then put them in the factory and make cars or widgets or whatever you got to do. That was the system from the late 1800s and 1900s, the history of the American day schools, American schools. The Jewish schools came along, and I tell this to a lot of people, in the 30s or 40s when we started, or after Yom Ha'atzmaut in 48, there was no Masorah of what a Jewish day school should be. We made it up. There was no real Masorah. Like, how much time should you spend with general studies, and how much time should be Torah studies? So people like my mother, Aleh Shalom, when she was growing up in Williamsburg in the 20s, the girls didn't go, there was no Jewish day school. They went to public school, and they had something called Talmud Torah. My father, same age, he was in the first class of Yeshiva Torah V'das, which I think just celebrated like the 103rd year or so. And it was like the Wild West in those days. He showed me a picture of 8th grade graduation. There were 15 guys. 2 of them were gangsters. This was the early days. The day school got a little more organized when people sat down, lay leaders sat down and said, what should this be? And then you had some giants. Like Rabbi Armin Friedman was someone who could think this through. How much of the day should be Torah studies, and what should be involved in Torah studies? But this is not so long ago. And most schools, the differential today is how much time for Torah studies, how much time for general studies. So Hal, for instance, we were very, very specific, 50% and 50%, because that was Rabbi Friedman's hashkafa. If you go to some cheder somewhere, or you go to a more pluralistic school, the ratio is much, much different. The problem today is the same thing as I mentioned a little while ago. You have to be careful who gives the principal the right to decide how much time and how much effort. So there's a little over 700 day schools in North America. I tell the rabbi an interesting statistics. There's a fellow named Alex Thompson who wrote a book. He was a JTS professor on Inside the Jewish Day School. And he has a statistic, 83% of all Jewish children living in America today never saw the inside of a Jewish classroom. 17% are in the 700 schools. That includes Satmar and Bubba and Lakewood and all these places which are bubbles. But when you go a little bit out of town, most kids are not in a Jewish day school. And I think part of what we have to do, we have to run better schools so people will want to be here. It was very disheartening when I was in Pittsburgh a long time ago, and you're talking to a family, you're thinking about the Jewish day school, and invariably they say, oh, there's excellent public schools in Pittsburgh. Why don't people say there's excellent private Jewish day schools in Pittsburgh? We have to learn how to market it and present a much better product if we really want to get more kids in. And I don't think today, and it was one of the questions about the finance, I don't think it's the money. B'li ayin hara, we live in a neighborhood where there is money. I travel a lot around the country. There is money in North America. There are many organizations that we work with. I spent the Shabbos a few weeks ago at the Zone at URA. URA funds tuitions out of town in a lot of schools. There's something called Chinuch Yehudi, who takes Israeli children from public school to the day school. And they pay all the tuitions. It's not a problem. But to convince a parent that Hebrew Academy of, I don't know, Tucson is as good as the public school, that's a stretch. And I think part of it is training of the principals, how they can show we have a quality program.
So let's do a bit to both of those as well. So we talked about the booklets that the consortium sends out. I was actually had the opportunity of visiting Rabbi Glass and seeing the print shop and seeing what's going on over there. So it's not just the booklets; it's standardizing the curriculum, which is an incredible thing. So like I've seen how that on so many subjects that every grade will be up to a certain and it's being measured on a certain matrix, so that if you change from school to school, we're in the same. What subjects has been covered yet, just to get a sense of what's been done?
So we developed something called the JSAT, Jewish Standard Achievement Test. People are usually familiar with a general studies achievement test, math, reading. So we developed something for basic Jewish knowledge. We developed something for Chumash skills. Now we're into Navi, Tefillah, which we got very involved in recently. Parsha. Core subjects that should be in every Jewish school. We test every year about 30,000 kids. But, I'll give you the weird analogy that I speak about sometimes. Let's say you're running HAL, and it's back to school night this time of the year, and you come into Mrs. Smith's third grade general studies class, and she's talking to you about how great this year is going to be in third grade. And she says, in my class, everything adds up. It's a very positive environment. Math is very, very important. And she uses the word positive and add a few times. So someone's sitting there thinking about it. He goes over to her afterward, Mrs. Smith, you seem like a great teacher. I can't wait for Michael to be in this class. Why do you use the same words a lot? So she says, my class, we don't do subtraction. So what we've allowed in the Jewish school, at least I got to smile at it somewhere. What we've allowed is every teacher decide what's important. And then, when they go through all 8 years, the kids might know nothing. So part of what I do at the office, I drink the coffee and hire people. We came up with standards. We interviewed 50 principals in North America, random. What should a fifth grader know? You can ask Mikey about it. What should a fifth grader know? What's important? And we came up with a list of standards. If there was an 80% consistency, it made it into the exam. If not, it wasn't important. So at the end of the day, we sent all the data to Rutgers, to some statistician, and came back, there's a 94% consistency. Which means of those 50 principals, 94% thought it was a value that every kid in the 5th grade should know, you ready? What's the Hebrew date of Yom Kippur? You might say, what's the difference? But if Yom Kippur is the most important day, maybe we should focus on that so that when they walk out into the world, they know something about who they are. So that's just an example. And some principals will say, it's not for me. Okay, so then don't take the test.
For them.
Okay, what?
For them.
Oh, yeah. So we do a lot of this stuff now. We came up with certain standards for Chumash, Davi, as I mentioned, a lot of other areas. And we're grappling with tefillah, as Rabbi Trump knows. Last year we did a pilot. We were approached by 8 schools in Bergen County. Any of you have children in Bergen County? There are 8 Jewish day schools in Bergen County. They came to us and they said, can you help us get organized? You're talking about schools like YNJ, Mariah, Yeshivat Noam, big schools. So I went there with Rabbi Yeaman, and we worked with them on a tefillah project. We took one of our workbooks. It's called Understanding Tefillah. It was written by Rabbi Ya'akov Trump, so an old KBY guy. And we taught the middle school kids a certain bracha in Shemon Esrei. It was a bracha Sim Shalom because of the war and everything else. And we also taught it to the parents that particular week. And we worked, for 1 week, we worked with all 27 rabbis in Bergen County. Everybody bought it. Rabbi Newberger loved this. He was like all over the place. He made a video for us. And now we did it in Norfolk, Virginia, in Ottawa, in Las Vegas. And this coming year, if you have kids in the local schools here, we're doing it. The PAL, Hafter, ready, hold your breath. Yeshiva South Shore, Yeshiva Katana, Tag. Everybody bought into this because I tell people, as Chata'ai ani maskir hayom. When I told you before, there's no Masorah for the schools. I've been doing this for 45 years. Probably what we should have started with a long time ago, instead of taking out a chumash and using it as like a textbook, can you translate this word? We should have started with Moda Ani Lefanecha. What's my relationship with Hashem? Who am I? And that's what we're trying to fix now, because again, you can go through 12 years of a Jewish day school, or a Cheder, or a Beis Yaakov, and not know what is Hashem, because we don't talk about it. So now we're starting to talk about it a little bit more, and we realize, with the rabbi's permission, we need parents involved, because otherwise, kids learn what they see their parents doing. If you want your children to call you on a Friday when you get older, so they have to see you calling your parents on a Friday. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So, anyway.
I'm very excited about this. Actually, I was speaking to our Yemens last night about this because there's over 450 kids signed up in this particular one. So I'm very excited to reach out to all the parents and grandparents in our shul to work with those parents to teach the tefillah on the other side, which we're working with the consortium. So it's an incredible alignment of education, which I think is important. So just speaking to that is can you just speak to, in general, having been a principal and seen this, is the parents' role in schooling? Meaning, like, in a certain sense, I feel like sometimes we as parents say to ourselves, we pay so much, right? So we say, it's like kind of my attitude on airplanes. It's like, I paid so much for this ticket. I want to just, take a little, put the earplugs in, and you, the stewardesses, will look after the kids because I paid so much for my ticket. So like, in a certain sense, we view the schools as a grandiose babysitting program. So like, how does this work?
So I thought you were going to ask you about the payment stuff.
We'll get in a second.
So it bothered me many, many years ago when I was first a principal back in Miami. My first board meeting ever as a principal. It was a small school in North Miami Beach, sitting there with about 5 or 6 fellas, and there was no smart boards then. It was an old blackboard with chalk. One fella gets up and says, "Oh, Rabbi Glass, I'm glad you're here as the new principal." There was no principal before. He says, "I think in this school it's important the kids sing Hatikva every morning." Goes to the board, writes the word Hatikva because we're setting up the school. Another fella gets up and says, "Ooh, I think it's very important that we don't sing that thing for him. He erases it. My first board meeting. So that's like chaos. So I tried to figure out what's the role of a parent in a Jewish day school. So I'm a little crazy. I was going for my doctorate in Florida. So my dissertation was on parental involvement in private Jewish day schools. I studied what do they do in the other side of the world in public schools. There's something in Baltimore called CREMS, the Center for Research in Elementary and Middle Schools, Dr. Joyce Epstein. She analyzes to the sky. And she came out with that there are 6 different types of parents in a school, parent involvement activities. First one, is the child wearing the right shoes? Do they match when they come to school? So a type 1 parent cares how the kid looks when they come to school. That's parental involvement. You know, having lunch or combing their hair. That's type 1. What's type 6? Where you go up the, type 6 is what I was living through in that first board meeting. It's parents not worried about their own children, but they're telling you about other people's kids. Okay, that's called a board member. Once you understand that you can categorize somebody as being a type 1 or a type 6, then it's a different type of relationship. So what the research shows us, to cut to the chase, I found this in HALB, by the way. Did a lot of surveys in the early years. Found this on the West Coast, and Dr. Epstein corroborated it in the Baltimore public schools. The only thing that makes a difference as a parent is if you're a type 4 parent. Now, I never spoke about this publicly, but type 4 is parents that learn with their own children. They got back to what the Gemara was talking about. Type 4 statistically will help your child in school. Nothing else. All the other things are, you have to do it. I can come to the school, a type 3 parent, they're on the bus helping with a trip or serving pizza, they're walking all over the building, all kinds of different things. So this is what I studied. So be a type 4 parent, okay? The schools today, I think, have taken on responsibilities which they weren't supposed to. Every school has a social worker, a guidance counselor, a behavior therapist, you name it. They have all kinds of support services. That was never part of what Yeshua ben Gamla was talking about. Yeshua ben Gamla said, you're busy, you're in the field, let's learn, make sure the child knows how to daven, to learn. It wasn't supposed to be the social worker and the psychologist and, people are getting all kinds of issues. I remember calling in Dr. David Tolkowitz so many times for crisis in families. Okay, I don't know who they use today. I guess what's his name? Dr. Blumenthal worked in HAL. He was our school psychologist. He tested every kid, right? If you had a child in kindergarten, you couldn't get into first grade until I read a report from Norman Blumenthal about the child. Okay, that was it. So parental involvement, it needs a system. You can't just assume that every parent knows what they're supposed to do, but I'm not sure it's the school's job to train the parents. Although on the other hand, I'll say something which I feel strong about. The client at a school is not the child. The client is the parent. Because the parent is the one that signs the registration form, is servicing the client through the child. But if you don't have a relationship with the client, you're not going to be successful with the child. So that's why the question comes up sometimes, and I deal with this a lot. Where should a principal live? Do you live in the neighborhood, or do you commute? So I lived around the corner, and everybody was Halber Hafner in those days around here. So when people see you and you have a relationship, I think it's better. Some people are scared of this. Like, I'm working all day long, why do I need this on Shabbos also? Why? You can ask me questions at the Kiddush, leave me alone. But if the person has the right attitude that we're friends, and we're in this together, then it's not so bad. Not so bad. People are people. People want the relationship building. Talk about the finances for a minute.
Yeah, so we don't dig into that, yeah, because to come to that finances, I guess, I just seeing from the rabbinic position now is that, with, the cost of the Jewish day schools and speaking to parents and people really just can't make it. Just can't, although there's a certain amount of the community that is able to make it, but I would say that certainly today a significant amount of people are having their parents pay for the tuition of their children. Just that it's not sustainable in that respect. So what happens is that you hear around the Shabbos table people saying things like the schools are wasting money, the schools are doing excess things. Like you just speak about the cost of education right now, because we have very, very smart and very intelligent, business savvy board members of the schools working on this all the time. And so this is not, it's about, and I just trying to figure out, from the inside track, where is all this money going? What does it cost to educate a child?
So first of all, there's a big difference between an elementary school and a high school. I know in the question you asked about other types of schools. Elementary school, it's more cookie cutter. In third grade, there's a Limudei Kodesh teacher, there's a general studies teacher. You don't have 9 different APs and all kinds of extras and electives and everything else. There are other communities, and if you have kids living in Florida, anybody?
Grandchildren.
I have kids in Boca.
Yeah. North Miami.
They get $8,000 per child from the state of Florida.
My Mechut did that.
I was in Phoenix last week. Phoenix is $13,000 per child from the state. We, in this neighborhood, you're paying twice. You're paying taxes and also tuition, which is a heavy burden. The schools probably could run a little bit more leaner if we didn't expect so much from the schools. The model, I think, which I spoke about on one of these podcasts a few years ago, we could learn from our cousins someplace. You go out on Long Island, there's something called the Archdiocese. There is one, there's many of them. The Archdiocese, the tuitions in the Catholic schools are small. It's much cheaper. What they do is, they have one back office for all the schools. So the local Catholic school does not have a business office. It's amazing. The Archdiocese handles all the finances for the entire district. We somehow decided that every school needs its own back office, which could run a lot of money, and we don't want to share. So in a place like the Five Towns, theoretically, you could have one back office doing all the tuition billing and all the accounts payable, without saying, oh, so this principal's earning a little bit more than that one, but who cares? Have a financial officer take care of it. Same thing when it comes to areas like IT. Anybody here ever go to Target? You go to Target. You ever see a technology guy at Target worrying about the computers? You never see this. Or the local bank. They rely on a back office to take, and Target cannot afford to have the computers go down. And somehow they're always working. Capital One Bank, the computers work. In the yeshiva, we have to hire an IT guy. Why? Have an office someplace that handles all the IT needs for all the yeshivas. Insurance, purchasing, all these things which add up after a while, make it easier. There was another thing which I did in the Hal days. Some of you hopefully appreciated it. When I first got to Hal, Limudei Kodesh was in the morning. So a Rebbe would work till 12:30, 1 o'clock. Then I don't know what he did in the afternoon. And we were hiring some excellent Rebbeim who are still there. So we came up with this proposal. We hired full-time Rebbeim. So someone like, throw out a nice name, Rabbi Libman, for instance, who's sitting Shiva today, unfortunately. So Rabbi Libman, instead of just running one 4th grade in the morning, he ran both 4th grades, AM and PM, and he had a general studies teacher opposite him. It was just a lot more efficient. Instead of paying a premium for half a day, you're paying a full-time salary. He's much happier. General studies teacher's much happier. Everybody's working full-time, and you have a better quality of instruction. It saved some money, but it also made the program, I think, much healthier. The other thing which the church does, we don't do that well. the schools are not the parents' responsibility. It's the community's responsibility. Most people in this room looking around are grandparents already, Baruch Hashem. Okay? And school, and I think this is where the rabbi was going with this whole 5-part series, it's not the parent saying, I have to worry about the finances of a school. It's the community saying, we need schools. Yeshua Magamla told us this is important. And as a community, if we don't educate the next generation, we're going to be in trouble. So the community should really assume the achrayus, either politically, go talk to the people up in Albany and make it work, or financially, have the right programs so that we can afford what's going on. Otherwise, it's going to be dangerous, because as the rabbi mentioned, it'll just get too expensive. You have to pay for a mortgage, and for the car, and tuition. I know a guy out in LA who's paying tuition for his grandchildren. He's a very influential person out there. He pays over $250,000 a year after taxes for his grandchildren. Some go to SAR, some go to Ramaz, some are on the West Coast, and it's very expensive. So I said, is it worth it? He says, what should I do? I want my grandchildren to marry Jewish people. I'm afraid. He's working like 18 hours a day to make sure his grandchildren have tuition. I don't think it's the right thing for the community. The schools have to sit down together and work it out.
We're just curious, why is it like, let's say as an example, in some of the more yeshivish communities, you go to Queens or Lakewood, the constitution is lower. Why is it the modern schools in general are a little more expensive?
So I got involved recently with a big school in Lakewood. One school there services 6,000 children. And I met with the head of school because I just brought over a principal from South Africa who's going to be working in Lakewood. And I asked them, how does it work? There's a minimum tuition. Everybody pays, I think, $3,000 or $5,000. That's it. The classes have 30 kids. They don't offer a gym class or an art class or a music class or definitely not a computer class. And the Rebbe gets a certain amount. General studies teacher gets very little, actually. And they just keep it lean and mean. There's no other expenses. And they do go to grandparents, not for tuition. They go to grandparents to help build the buildings. So you go all over Lakewood, you'll see something or another. And it's grandparents giving money. Some of them are giving the money so that their grandchild will have a seat in the school. Otherwise, they say, we have no room, which is how it's happening a lot today.
What's
they don't pay the Rebbe's a lot of money.
In general, yeah, but it has to sound like it's just, what's to stop the race to the top? Meaning there's no regulating body saying to the schools, you don't need a $50,000 open house. You don't need to have a choreography class because the school next door started. Like, what's stopping the schools just from adding and adding and adding because the parents demand, and therefore the rest of the parents have to pay for it? Like, how do we do that?
So my first year at EULA, which was like in 06, 07, something like that, there was a Shabbaton for the whole school. We went out to a retreat in Big Bear. If you're familiar with California, a ski resort on top of Big Bear, wild. And I got the bill for the Shabbos, it was over $50,000. This is nuts. Most of the kids didn't keep Shabbos, unfortunately. It didn't make a difference. They were running around the whole time. We stopped it the next year, and I promoted giving each Rebbe a few extra dollars. Have the kids come to you for Friday night meal, like 3 or 4 kids at a time. The Rebbe loved it, the Rebbe's wife loved it, because she was part of it, and the kids loved it. They felt the connection to the Rebbe, as opposed to sending 200 boys to a mountaintop and not knowing what's going to be. So schools have to think about it a little bit, and when Rabbi Che taught me how to be a principal, the second rule was, you're spending other people's money. And if principals don't appreciate that, then it's wrong. There has to be some sort of accountability, some sort of achrayus. Do you need this type of open house with all kinds of fancy stuff? The answer is no. We need to market Jewish day schools a little bit better, not in the 5 towns per se, but in Calgary, right, which have Jewish people in, or in Portland, they have Jewish people in these places. We're opening up a new Jewish day school now, believe it or not, in Sarasota, Florida. It's Jews. Someone came to us, can you help us with the school? So we're involved in Sarasota. We have Tampa, Orlando, Sarasota's right between. Start a Jewish day school. But it needs startup money, it needs marketing, it needs a whole bunch of stuff. But nothing fancy, just like basic principals have to learn about marketing, or hire a marketing firm. Last year we worked with the OU, kind of on Weishbana heavily, and to do a marketing campaign. We thought after October 7th, with a lot of anti-Semitism in the public schools, it's an opportunity to get kids out of the public schools into the Jewish schools. We did a video, we targeted 5 communities. One was Plainview, where Rabbi Fogel is now. Another community was Portland. Another one was San Diego. And some of it was successful. You know, spend a few $1,000s on a nice marketing campaign, not specific to your school, but in general. What's the difference between a public school and a private Jewish school where Rebecca becomes Rivka? That was the whole movie, you know, where she was hiding her Magen David. And at the end of the movie, when she's in the Jewish school, she takes out her Magen David, and now she's Rivka. That's transformational from where we're coming from. But we need more of that instead of just, I don't know, spending a lot of money on glitz. You're right.
Incredible. There's so much more to discuss today. I guess we go just to close on this is that you've seen so much. What gives you hope? What gives you hope? What makes you optimistic about the future of the day school program?
So I tell principals, I'm probably the oldest guy in Chinuch today. If you actually see, if you stay with it long enough, you see the results. You see what the kids become. So today, if you go to Israel, by the way, places like Ramat Beit Shemesh, Neve Shamir, hey, half the place, right, is our students. You know, and it's wonderful. You wind up, you shouldn't, in Shari Tzedek emergency room. Both doctors that manned the room came out of hell, okay? 2 girls who in 6th grade I would have said, what? They're now running the emergency room at Shari Tzedek. I think the kids have to understand, like what's the potential for them for the future, and to learn how to give back a little bit also to the community. Too many of our kids are just going through the system and they're not being ingrained a little bit. What's your potential? What could you become? They should know that these 2 girls are running the emergency room over there. Wow, you know, they used to be in that classroom over there. So I think the future looks good, but my real concern for the future is the manpower. There's just not enough people that want to do this kind of work. You know anybody? We have a training program for colon in North America today. We have 30 guys. We have something we call the Mora Vad, which was here in the shul when we had the program a few weeks ago. We have 150 women that have banded together in out-of-town schools to bring in more people and to grow. We'd love to bring in more and make it a much more robust profession. If you do it the right way, trust me, your kids will eat, they'll be happy, you'll meet wonderful people. I have no regrets living in this neighborhood for a long time. And what's fascinating, even after I left the neighborhood to go to LA, we moved back because we felt this was home. And one of the earliest encounters I met with Rabbi Trump, I had a Shiloh. We were living on Broadway yet. One of my kids put up a hammock between 2 trees outside my house. So I wasn't sure, Shabbos. Rabbi Trump came running over, he looked at the hammock, you know, I gave him psak. This is a Rav. It's not just, you know, a phone call, you know, let's take a look at it. Remember that? So that maybe is very special. This was home. And we moved a few blocks away, we're now on Central Avenue. And every morning I'm still here, and it's wonderful people. This is a real home for growth, for Torah, for tefillah, to everything else, and believing in Eretz Yisrael, and we should capitalize on it. But I would encourage the shul, bring in other communities to see it. They need to see what the potential of a community could be.
Guys, this is really, really eye-opening and really appreciative. I just want to encourage everybody to, if you want to just see what's going on, want to be impressed by what's going on in education, go to Pearsall, just see what's going on in the consortium. It's a consortium. It's a revolving door.
395 Pearsall, anytime.
And this is really amazing. And this is Rabbi Glass, who very quietly and humbly davens at our early minyan every morning. You don't realize what's going on, changing the lives of tens, hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives. Rabbi Glass, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's been a great